I'm Mark Bell with Thermal Diagnostics. Today I'm going to be talking about temperature screening. How effective is it? I'm going to look at some common off-the-shelf temperature screening solutions, and we're going to look at our Fever Inspect temperature screening solution. And we're going to look at how these systems get the numbers they get. And the answer may surprise you, but not for the reasons you might be expecting. So we all know why we started with doing temperature screening 6 months ago. Among adults, and among those who are symptomatic, fever is one of the 3 most common symptoms. And we all know about asymptomatic spread, but in the 50% or so of people, adults who are going to be symptomatic, fever is most likely going to be on that list of symptoms. And if you can identify someone with a fever the first 2-3 minutes they're in a workplace and send them home right away, that's much, much better. That's a very different scenario than letting them stay in the office for 8 solid hours. So you can reduce your overall risk by doing fever screening. But there's some problems with the way it's been done today. The best way to detect a fever would be to use a proper clinical thermometer, like one of these. These are a bit better than what you might find on the shelf. The problem is that these are not readily available, plus they require you to get up close and personal. So people have switched to using, people immediately resorted to using these forehead IR scanners. These are very common. You'll see these in many places, and also these tablet systems. And tablet systems I have a big problem with. They all seem to be coming from one Chinese manufacturer, and you can read a little bit more about this at, there's an independent testing group called ipvm.com. They've done an expose on the tablet maker behind this. We have a video where we've gone into a local school that has these tablets, walked up to the tablet with a picture printed out, and it just reported a normal temperature. And that's a different thing than we're dealing with today. But we're still going to talk about problems with what's out there, but clearly that is a big problem. And we'd like to see that taken care of. There will be class action lawsuits in the coming days against systems that are that bad. But there's also problems with what's currently approved on the market. And so we're going to be looking at 2 common forehead IR scanners in our system. And we have a simple test that shows how these things work. Because you were going to try and figure out how well does this thing perform against an oral thermometer, you'd find out that they both seem to work about the same. Unless you started including people who were really, really cold or really, really warm. And these are the ones of interest, the warm ones. That's the bottom line. How well do these things work down here? Not just right in here, because that's all you're going to be testing for with one of these. And a little known fact is that if I just made a box that said 98.6 all the time, you also wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So we've implemented a simple test here where we use IR calibrators, also known as black bodies. And we're going to set them to each of these core body temperatures. The one on the left is set to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. The one on the right is set to 96 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll measure what each system reports at each set point, and then we will increment. 97.2 and 97.4. We're ready. 97.4. We'll measure with system 2. I'm going to put it at a consistent distance each time. 96.2 and 96.4. Similar. Our system is saying 94.5. 95.5. 5. And I will increment the set points and while it warms up, we will have to wait. Okay, so while that's warming up, I'm going to tell you about a system that does work. It was invented around 2003 with the first SARS epidemic in Southeast Asia and in America. Thermal imaging cameras and an IR calibrator, or black body, held on a tripod on one end and a tripod on the other end holding the camera, and people would walk by the IR calibrator. The IR calibrator is the only way to get thermal imaging to be as accurate as you need it. Because thermal imaging can only be calibrated to a plus or minus 2 degrees Celsius, which is 3.6 Fahrenheit, which is useless for this. But if you pair it with an IR calibrator, you can get down to 0.1 degrees Celsius accuracy. And that's where we've gotten to. Once you do that, however, a trained operator has to sit at the thermographic camera and inspect each image, or otherwise you can semi-automate it with these scenarios where they're doing face detection. But in general, you still need to have a trained operator, and that's why we developed the Fever Inspect. It takes away that burden by putting that entire laboratory setup into this with 2 IR calibrators, thermal imaging camera, distance to target sensor, and we compensate for changes in ambient air temperature, which to our knowledge none of the other systems do. And that takes all the burden off of the operator. So we're our second set point, 97.6 and 97.8. And 96.7 and 97.2. And our system is saying 97.7. The higher 96.2. And then we'll increment again. So how do we get from surface temperature to a core body temperature estimate? All of these systems, and actually even this system inside, does an extrapolation. It takes what is the temperature I'm measuring right now, what do I know from the physics of the scenario to get to a core body temperature. In humans, the thinnest, most accessible area on the body is the inner canthus, and that's this area right above the angular artery. And it's a thin layer of insulation that's the most consistent from person to person, and there's no vasodilation, so blood vessels getting bigger and smaller. If you look at the forehead with a thermal imaging camera, take a picture of someone, you might see an artery going up here or here. You take another picture an hour later, and it might be completely flat, like you don't see anything. That's due to vasodilation, which is changing all the time due to mood, your temperature regulation of your body, what you've eaten. Just changes constantly. And so forehead is not as accurate. These do a little bit worse than what they could be doing, and we'll see in a minute as we get these measurements. 98.0, 98.2, 97.5, 98.1, 98.9, 1.5. There's always some variability with any measurement. We want to try to minimize it as much as possible. We believe in getting as close as you can to the real number. So the way we got our physiologic corrections, we scanned a number of people at a large company nearby that engaged us to try and figure out what works and what doesn't. And they generously helped us with a large population of people we scanned in a walk-in cooler at between 40 and 50 degrees Fahrenheit, where we took account of the ambient air conditions. We made them wait so that they would cool down appropriately the right amount of time. And we kept them free of any drafts while we measured them in the cooler, in a 70-degree environment, and an 85-degree environment. And that not only gave us our physiologic correction that we use today, it also gave us the results that we discovered that we could detect up to 95% of fevers with our system. And that's right around where you want to be able to reduce your risk in the facility. Like, yes, there's asymptomatic spread, and yes, there's people that you're just not going to catch. You're not going to catch them with any kind of a system. I don't know if you recall, but the antibody tests are not 100% either. They're significantly lower than that. Originally, there are ones that are no better than chance. But if since improved, and if you layer in all these elements to this prevention strategy, you can reduce your R value and your risk. 98.3, 98.7. .1 and 98.5. Well, our system has what's called a compliance mode, which is, you can turn it off, but it's intended to ensure that someone reacts to a fever detection. And you react to it by just pressing a button to turn it off. So we'll just say 101.3. 100.7. Let's repeat the measurement. 100.7. And you can turn that off, but it just ensures that someone reacts to the information somehow. Which is why we don't recommend turning it off unless you have a compliance plan. We will probably cut this video down, rearrange it so that it's easier to consume, but we will also post this entire one-take video so that you can see exactly what we did along the way. And the results, we believe the numbers will kind of speak for themselves. We also have a white paper on risk reduction. Like, how do you calculate if a system's got this much wiggle in it with this much variability, which all measurements do, and then the population has this much wiggle in it, which human body temperatures have a plus or minus 1 degree Fahrenheit in it. When you put those things together, what is your detection efficiency? How likely is your system to detect a fever? And the answer is you have to look at the standard deviation of each and check out the white paper on our website at www.feverinspect.com to learn more about that, as well as this test protocol that we're proposing to the FDA. This is the first of two. The second test is to look at how these systems react to change in air temperature, which is the other big part of it. All right, so we are ready. 99.0. 99.6, it beeped at me. 99.6. It beeped, but still, I don't think anybody is sending people home if they're getting a 99.6. 98.8. 99.2. 9.2. And what are we at? 102.8. 104.0. There you have it. These results show you that if someone's severely hypothermic, this is below normal. Between 97.7 and below is below normal. 95 and below is hypothermia. But these systems, you see this all the time. Your people are being scanned outdoors and wind going. They're scanning through car doors. People are wearing hats, and you're seeing temperatures like this. And that's just a little concerning, because anywhere between here, you want a system, bottom line, that if the person is too cold, it tells you they're too cold, because it might mean they're using the system incorrectly, which could be pushing the numbers down. Like, there's wind blowing in the person. You need to know that, wow, we're getting a lot of low numbers. Maybe something is wrong with the system. But these would essentially hide that by making it look like still kind of normal. Worse, however, is once you get to 99.5, anywhere above that, that's where we start worrying. That's where the fevers are. And if you can't detect fevers, which these systems essentially don't detect anything, we haven't been doing fever screening yet. We've been using these, which just say a number instead of screening for temperature. And so the bottom line is that you want a system that will say 95 for the person? Yes. they're definitely too cold. They're too hot? Yes, they're definitely too hot. Not something that just tells a number that says normal regardless. And that's why we developed the Fever Inspect. Please visit us at www.feverinspect.com.